Cloud. Welcome, everybody, to our January Forgotten Grapes wine tasting, virtual tasting, Forgotten Grapes Wine Club virtual tasting. So excited to have you here. We are doing something completely different for the first time ever. It is our first ever repeat winery, but it's not at all a repeat winery, which we're very, very excited about to have Liz and Markus Bokisch here with us to talk about their Tizona line of wines, which we will get to in just a second. Before we begin, of course, our ground rules, we'll have the chat going. If you have any questions, throw those in there. We're going to have everybody muted at this point. So please, yes, just want to make sure I've got everybody muted. All right, I think I've got everybody muted. Excellent. Yeah, if you've got any questions, comments, food pairings, whatever it might be, throw those into the chat. Alice and I will be monitoring that, so we'll be able to ask those questions during the event. And of course, most importantly, as I know you are all aware, but the Festival of Forgotten Grapes is sneaking up on us. March 29th, Saturday, March 29th is the date. And I know, Allison, we've got just a few more days, I believe 8 more days for our early bird ticket special going. Do you want to tell the folks about that?
Sure. We have repeat wineries. We have lots and lots of new wineries. We're very, very sad that Bokisch cannot join us for the second year in a row, even though I gave them the date before anyone else.
No.
she's gonna lay on the guilt. Be prepared.
No, it's only because we would love to have them there. But yeah, we have over 40 wineries, and we had to move the venue. We're just a block away, so if you go to the original venue, don't worry, you're in the right place. And tickets, VIP tickets, are $99. Those will not change. They will not go up or down. And general admission early bird tickets are $59, and they jump up to $69 on February 1st. And you know, we may, for our wine club members, send a $10 code off just in case you miss that, so you get it at $59. But please share it with your friends. Tell everyone. It was such a great event last year, and we want more people to know about all these amazing forgotten grapes and amazing producers, so that we can do it in year 3, and then Liz and Markus can join us.
Yes. And I know a lot of you have already bought your tickets, so thank you, but definitely tell your friends, gather groups. Last year we had, I believe it was 121 different wines that were poured at the event, 75 different varietals, for those of you who speak properly. And we are excited. We are excited with more wineries to feature even more new grapes, new forgotten grapes that were not poured in the first year. So it's going to be
13 different regions in California, including the Syrah foothills, Sacramento, Gilroy. I will be sending out the invite next week from my end, and Chris will get his out, and then we will have postcards that are in the process of being made.
Yeah. So we will send that digitally to you guys. And of course, you can always go to festivalofforgottengrapes.com, which has all the information, all the wineries, information on our food vendors this year. Yes, there will be more food vendors than there were last year. I know that was the one complaint that we had. So we are making good on that. So it should be very, very exciting. All right. With all of that out of the way, let's bring on our featured guests, who you may remember from, gosh, way back when, in October of 2023, we featured them in the Forgotten Grapes Wine Club in their true form, their natural form, you know, focusing on their Spanish varietals, their amazing Spanish varietals. But they are back better than ever here in 2025. We're so excited to have Markus and Liz Bokisch with us. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
Awesome. And we always start out by asking, what's the most memorable bottle of wine that you've ever opened? But since you've already answered that, we want to stick with a theme and say, what was the most memorable French bottle of wine that you've ever opened? Or even better, what is the most memorable second label bottle you've ever opened?
Or what is the second most memorable wine? Because I bet you they don't remember what they told you a couple years ago.
Probably not.
I don't know. That can be a very tough question, you know?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know.
I
That's
mean,
why we ask it. We only ask the
well,
tough questions here.
Okay, well, I have a story.
No softballs. Yeah.
I have a story. So when Marcus and I moved to Spain back in 1994, we lived in San Sadurní d'Anoia, just outside of Barcelona. And before we moved to Spain, Marcus had been working at Joseph Phelps Vineyards in Santa Elena. So we got to enjoy a lot of delicious French varietal wines, but California made. And so when we moved, we brought a couple bottles of wine with us, and we brought Phelps Chardonnay, which when we moved, that was like one of our favorite wines.
Mhm.
And halfway through the year, we opened up that bottle of wine we've been coveting, you know,
Yeah.
and we were like, oh my God, this is so big and so huge and so oaky. And we realized that our taste buds had changed so much in 6 months of living in Spain and drinking fresher Spanish varietal wines than the big California oaky Chardonnays, that it just completely shocked us, because I just didn't even realize how much our taste buds had changed during that time, you know? And so that was a shocking and memorable experience for me. And like this Picpoul Blanc is delicious because it's fresh and love, and I absolutely love it. We actually been growing Chardonnay. It was one of the first varieties we ever planted at our Terra Alta vineyard, and always sold the fruit. You know, it wasn't really our thing for our winemaking until we had a custom crush client who wanted to make Chardonnay from our grapes, and we tasted our own Chardonnay from our own grapes, and it was made in a stainless steel style, and yeah, and loved it. So we're like, well, maybe, you know, time to go back 30 years later and look at maybe we got this Tizona portfolio. We could try our hand at a nice fresh Chardonnay, Bokisch style.
Nice. Yeah, and of course you gave us the perfect seg there, Liz, by talking about the Picpoul, which we've got opened right now. So let's do two things. First, I'd love for those who didn't join us or just don't remember from, 18, 19, 20 months ago, give us a quick refresher on your background, how you guys got into wine, your trip to Spain, the van, all of that. But then I also want you to walk us through how the Tizona line came to be. What was the inspiration behind it? What led you to create this second label focused on French varietals as opposed to Spanish?
Sure, yeah. So Liz and I met in college, and I had studied international agricultural development with the purpose of going to Central America and working on tropical fruit production. And Liz was learning Spanish as a minor, and she was on the way to Madrid to teach English to business people. And she and I met our freshman year in college, but we never really had the similar social groups until our senior year. And then so it was quite a few years. I went for a year abroad. She went for a year abroad. We finally decided, okay, we're going to meet up and see how this goes. And so Liz put her teaching on hold. I put my Central American passport to going into tropical fruits on hold. And we decided, okay, let's see how this relationship is going to go. And the place closest to Davis where I could get a job in agriculture was Napa. So I jumped over the hill to the coastal range, and I started looking for jobs, and I was able to find a job with Joseph Phelps Vineyards, which was, in hindsight, an amazing opportunity. And Liz got a job at Napa High School. And so we started working in Napa, and we got enamored with the wine business. For me, from a scientific point of view, looking at plant diseases, I could focus on one plant, the grapevine, and then try to really understand plant diseases and how to take care of plants. At the same time that the Napa Valley was being redeveloped because of phylloxera. Phylloxera hit the Napa Valley in the late 80s and destroyed most of the vineyards by the 90s. And I was there for the redevelopment, and that was an amazing experience for me. We had all these French researchers coming over and helping us with different rootstock selections, clonal selections, how to improve California wines. It was fantastic. So that was a huge impetus for us. And I thought, oh my God, I love this business. We're going to stick in this business. And then at that point, we cranked up my 1967 Volkswagen bus and said, let's move to Europe and understand where these vines come from, their origins, the origin stories of the vines. So we drove across the United States. We put it on our bus on a boat, picked it up in Southampton, England, drove all over Europe, got jobs. Before we left, we got jobs. And we worked in Spain for about a year, and then spent about a half a year just driving all over Europe, tasting wines all over Europe. I mean, Italy and the Czech Republic and Austria, Germany, France, Portugal. We went everywhere. And then we ran out of money, and we had to come back home.
As so often.
Did you bring the van back with you, or did it get stuck in Spain?
No, we brought the van back.
Oh, you didn't sell
well, I
the
was
van.
very
That would
lucky.
have been fun too. We sold the van to keep us
We sold
going.
Yeah, thank God we didn't, because now that van is worth a lot of money.
We still have it,
Well,
and it runs beautifully. Oh yeah,
I gotta say, there's something about those vans because,
Oh, the early VWs are nearly indestructible. Like that's why
not
there's
to make
still
light of
bugs
it,
and Vanagons on the
but
on
did
the
you
road.
see that in the Palisades fire, the blue VW van that was untouched on the street?
Yes.
I did not see that.
There, thank God. Yeah, it survived.
I mean, I have friends who have lost cars that have melted in fires in Sonoma and elsewhere. I have friends that have, who lost things and the cars burned, but that car is bright blue and sitting on the street still.
It's true. Yeah, there's a picture of that. Yeah.
In 1993, we were in the Northern Rhone visiting a friend, and he had rented a farmhouse way up high in the hills. And so he was really into Syrah and Viognier, it was like the Saint Joseph area. And we were coming from Spain, and we're dealing with Monastrell and Tempranillo and Graciano and Garnacha. Yep. And before we went back to the United States, we went to visit him. And we drove our VW bus way up into the mountains, up in the Northern Rhone, parked outside of this farmhouse. And that night there was an incredible thunderstorm, and everyone slept in the house except for Liz and I. We slept in the Volkswagen bus at the front door. And you know how it is when a lightning storm happens, you go lightning, and then you start counting 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. And we're like, oh my God. And we realized the storm was coming in our direction because the timing was getting shorter and shorter between the lightning bursts and the sound. And finally, the lightning cracked above us at the same time as the sound.
Oh, wow.
And we're sleeping in the bus. It's pouring rain, and we're terrified that we're going to get electrified. But the bus was grounded by rubber tires.
Yep.
The people in the house had an illegal electrical connection.
Oh, no.
And the entire lightning storm went in and burnt out the entire house. It burnt out all the electrical.
Mm-hmm.
And they came out and they're like, are you guys okay? We're like, we're good.
Yeah,
we're in the VW. We're good.
You guys want some tunes? You need some light? Because we got plenty of electricity here with our battery. No problems.
That bus, I tell you, yeah, we still have it. I learned how to,
Pop the
pop
clutch.
the clutch.
Yeah.
and,
Drive
break
manual. Yeah.
down.
Yep.
But yeah, so so when we
I'm
came,
really surprised. I mean, I understand that you named the winery Bokisch after your last name, but I'm really surprised that you didn't use that as like the name of the winery and it's not sitting in the front with like, as an Instagram Photoshop, shot of like.
Or you're offering people to do a tasting in the van at like, $200 a pop, like,
yeah,
taste in some history.
you're onto something there. I like
Or
that.
serving out the
I'm
window.
a marketer. I'm sure they talked about something similar at your DTC conference.
Yeah, or
just
you
gave
make it
me-
your wine bar and you serve out the window.
Okay, but you have to realize that we were young and we were a little stupid. And so at one point we got to Galicia in the van and we were starving and we didn't have a lot of money, but like, you know what? Galicia's known for its Atlantic salmon. Let's buy a salmon. So we went to a store, looking at all the salmon, and this one woman who was the fishmonger, she's like, okay. Oh, she looked at us with pity. She's like, oh, here's a beautiful salmon. This fits your budget. And we bought the salmon. And then we went out to the Rias, the beautiful fjords of Galicia. We parked our bus in a campground and we cooked these salmon steaks in the bus. And for 2 weeks after that, we had the worst fish smell.
Yeah.
And years later, there's a little hint of fishiness.
Yeah. You just
Yeah,
pick up a
right?
little bit of smoked salmon in the background. Yeah.
It was horrible. Oh my goodness.
That's
Um,
amazing.
Okay, so then when we came back from living in Spain, we did bring the van, we shipped it back to New Jersey, we drove it back across the United States, and we were so inspired by all of our travels, especially the French vineyard. Oh, there's
Sorry,
the
as promised, here is Walter Snacks, the Cellini. Yes,
Aw,
exactly.
of course.
That's our good little boy right there. So
That's
so
so sweet.
cute.
sorry, yes.
So anyways, we brought back the idea of the dream of basically making wine from our own grapes, the French vigneron concept. But we wanted to do it with Spanish varieties because Marcus's family is Spanish. His mother's side is Spanish, father's side was Czech and German. So Marcus was actually born in Germany and they immigrated to the United States when he was a little kid. So that's what we did. We brought over vine cuttings and we started planting the Spanish varieties, but we've always had a special place in our heart for French varieties. Well, I mean, that's basically the California wine industry was all French varieties. So that's what we,
Yes.
got started with really enjoying, especially.
Although it was a certain set of French varieties, and then thanks to the Judgment of Paris, it became an entirely different set of French varieties.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we, our first vineyard we ever planted was actually, Chardonnay and Syrah.
Mhm.
And we planted Merlot because we were able to get, grapevine contracts with that. And then once we got going with the farming, we planted the Spanish varieties. So that was our first real introduction into this wine business. And we started the Tizona label after we had the Spanish varieties going, our Spanish label, which you guys may have tasted a couple years ago. Because Marcus couldn't stand it anymore. Living in Lodi, he's like, I want to make an old vine zin. That's what you do in this town, right? And we're not from Lodi, but
I don't want to zag. I want to zig. I want to be like everybody else.
we wanted to be like everybody. So and there was a beautiful, the Kirschman Vineyard is just around the corner from our house. We drive by it every day. And so Marcus is like, I got to get some of that fruit. I'm like, well, what are we going to do? We can't put that with the French varieties. I mean, there's no way you can make zin into a French, or I mean, a Spanish wine, right? So we started the Tizona brand originally for the old vine zin. After a while, we decided, okay, we love the zin, but we want to move into old vine Carignan and Malbec and Picpoul Blanc and Petit Verdot. And so the Tizona brand started growing and becoming very, very French focused. So it started out as a way to a companion brand to do the Old Vine Zin, and then that translated to the Old Vine Carignan and so on. So.
Yeah, it's interesting
So no
because
more Zinfandel? Is Zinfandel out?
no, Zinfandel, yeah, we're no longer making Zinfandel. And we
Everybody
have
makes
bottled.
Zinfandel. Why make a Zinfandel at this point,
Yeah.
right? Now instead of zigging, they're now zagging. So they zigged,
Yeah.
now they're zagging. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you, I remember clearly, I was so lucky to work at Joseph Phelps Vineyards. And one of the things that Joe did, I thought it was really special, but he'd say, hey, I got a Cessna. You want to go flying with me?
Mm.
And I'm like, sure, I'd love to go flying with you. Good, because I want to find some old Carignan vineyards through the North Coast that we might be able to buy fruit from for the new Van de Mistral program. I'm like, Carignan.
The Irish grape.
Oh.
The Irish grape.
Irish.
Yeah.
Oh, Carignane. Oh, okay. So I'm like, sure, let's go. And then for the next week, everyone in the room, like whenever I walked into the office, everyone was really silent. Like almost sad that I was going flying with Joe Phelps. And I'm like, what's up, guys? It's like, oh, none of us would ever fly with him. He's kind of crazy when he flies. I'm like, okay, well, we're gonna go. So, I mean, this is way before cell phones or anything. So we would fly all over the North Coast, and I had a map on my lap, a paper map. And we would look down on the ground and we would kind of truth the ground and go, ooh, there's an Old Vine vineyard. Don't know what it is. And I would mark it on the map. Ooh, there's another one. And mark it on the map. Ooh, there's another one. And we marked like 50 vineyards on the map. And then I spent the next 2 weeks driving, trying to find those vineyards to buy Old Vine Carignan or an old Petit Syrah or all these different varietals. And it just, I mean, it was such an amazing experience to be put into a situation of looking at Old Vine, North Coast,
Mhm.
unique vineyards, unique terroirs. And then, of course, later on, we got into the Spanish thing because that is my story. That is our story. That is what we do. That's where all my entire family is, except for my brother and my mother and us. We're all in Spain. But we never forgot the origin of our inclusion into the wine business, which were really just unique, interesting French varietals.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what really got us going in that direction. And so later on, we're like, I think we need to explore French varietals under a different label. And that's what really got us doing Tizona. And Tizona was always it still is. It's not a nationally distributed brand. We don't really sell at DT. We pretty much all DTC. And the focus is always unique French varietals, not the mainstream varietals.
I was going to point that out. Yeah. This is not your Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Cabernet, Merlot. This is French, but the fringes, the forgotten grapes of France, which we
Except
absolutely love.
Syrah.
Well, yeah, even Syrah is kind of on the border there. I mean, we can argue about that, but you kind of answered one of my questions, which is how amazing eyesight did Joseph Phelps have if he was able to scout Old Vine vineyards from high up in a Cessna? But clearly, it's anything without trellises must have been marked down on the map, I imagine, back in those days. So,
Oh God, yeah. I have to tell you, it's like I was 24 and I had no fear in the world. I have much more fear now than I did when I was 24. And so I would drive, I would like try to find these vineyards, ground truth them, and I'd be opening up cattle guards and going through these dirt roads high up into the mountains, 10 miles off a paved road. I'd knock on a door and I'd say, hey, that vineyard over there, what's the variety? And they'd say, oh, it's it's Carignan, or it's, you know,
Yeah.
Grenache Blanc or Grenache Gris. Like, well,
How much?
you farm it really well. Would you be willing to sell it to Joseph Phelps? And I kid you not, 10 out of 10 times the grower would say, this vineyard's gone to Gallo since 1933.
Interesting. Hmm.
So no, we're not selling to anybody else. And I'm like, wow, and that was a real interesting lesson to me.
Yeah.
Because you had these growers who had this total commitment to the only person who would buy their fruit at that time for 50 years, 50, 60 years.
Yeah. It's that loyalty. It was all done on a handshake deal. I'm sure there was, one set price, they didn't need to raise it. It was just what it was. So
Exactly. It was really interesting. The place where we were able to break the Gallo contract was when we went to Oakley for Mourvedre.
oh, okay.
A lot of those growers were like, oh yeah, oh, more money? Okay.
Plus, yeah, Gallo probably didn't really want the Mourvedre. What are they going to do with that? So, they'll take everything else, but
Which of course is our Monastrell, which is the Spanish name for Mourvedre.
Yep.
And so but yeah, it was very interesting. It was that deep sense of connection and loyalty that existed, doesn't exist anymore, but existed at that time when I was in the business.
Yeah.
Getting into the business. It was really beautiful.
That's amazing. So let's kind of do a deep dive into this this Picpoul Blanc, which is just absolutely fantastic. Terra Alta is, of course, your vineyard. Was this something that had been planted there to begin with, or was this something that you guys brought in? And if so, why did you select Picpoul?
So Picpoul was not initially on the Terra Alta vineyard. So just so that everybody knows, when we planted the Terra Alta vineyard, we were very cash poor. And so we had to have contracts with large wineries to be able to get bank financing. And so
nobody wanted Picpoul, did they?
Nobody wanted Picpoul. It was not understood at all. So it was Chardonnay, Merlot. And then at that time,
They're like, I don't care how you pick it, pull it, push it, just, give us the grapes.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Syrah was cutting edge. Like, oh my God, Syrah. So Picpoul was not even on anyone's radar screen. So we had to get through the first 10 years of financing to pay off the bank, and then we could plant whatever we wanted. And one of the varieties that we really were interested in was Picpoul Blanc. And part of the reason is that even though it's considered a French variety, it's also in northeastern Spain in the area of Girona. And so, we thought, okay, this is this kind of really acidic, steely, just really not in any way like a Chardonnay, like the absolute antithesis to a Chardonnay. We're like, okay, this is something we could be interested in. And so we decided to plant it. It turns out that the Lodi Picpoul Blanc actually has a little bit more lushness to it, a little more body to it than the French Picpouls. And but we just absolutely loved it because it's so food friendly. It reminded us a lot of what the notes of Albarino give to food.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was our main.
When you say the lushness, you think that's because of the climate?
Oh yeah, I think it's California. Like when you taste our Albarino, when you taste a lot of, we try to make wines that would be almost indistinguishable from Spain. But having said that, if you taste a lot of like Cambados, Albarino, you'll get this real kind of like lemony character and very high acidity. And ours tends to be also high acidity, but sweeter citrus, like more tangerine. And that's something that is the California footprint on that variety. Yeah. And we can't get away from that. And we love it. It's delicious. So with the Picpoul Blanc, if you taste some of the French versions, they're extremely minerality, steely, high acidity. Ours tends to be a little more unctuous, a little more fatty, even though we pick it, believe it or not, at between 19 and 20 bricks, really, really low sugar.
Yeah.
And it's a variety that reminds me a lot of Roussanne in the sense that it takes forever to ripen, because let me tell you, when we pick it at even 20 bricks, it's one of the last varieties we pick. And I'm talking about the red varieties as well.
Oh,
It's
wow.
the last ones we
Yeah.
pick, but it has screaming acidity. And if we picked it earlier, it would be too acidic,
Yeah.
So it's not an easy grape to grow, but ultimately it creates this really, really well-balanced wine that goes very well with things that Albernia would go well with: seafood, white meat. It's just a very, very approachable.
It makes me want to have fried calamari or something, like, doesn't that sound
Yeah.
good right now?
It
A little
does, or like
Sounds
a
really good right now.
Yeah.
like a plateau de foie de mer, like with the
Yeah.
raw oysters and the shrimp and all the
It
good
can
stuff,
do all of those things so
It
well.
always has to one up with something like bigger. It can't just be a plate of calamari, it has to be a tower of seafood.
Yeah. All right, fine. We'll go with grilled vegetables. It would go lovely with a plate of freshly grilled vegetables. But I 100% agree with your assessment on Picpoul in California. I know here in Paso Robles, the Picpouls are, if you put a French Picpoul next to a California Picpoul, it's not 100% night and day, but it's like night and late afternoon. There's definitely a roundness to it, a fullness. You don't get as much of that lip stinger acidity, which is what the French name loosely translates to. But you still get that higher level of acidity and that freshness that comes with it. Even more so than Albarino. I think Albarino has a little more roundness to it naturally, where Picpoul is just like straight acid at times, it feels like.
Yeah. Interestingly, the variety is grown in France, in an area that France took over in the 1600s. They used to be part of Spain.
Mhm.
It was part of Catalonia, right?
Right.
And so you find Picpoul in Girona, in the northern Catalan areas.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah, and it's called Picpoul.
Okay.
And it tends to be more
Good
similar.
name for a dog, Picpoul.
I was gonna
Picpoul.
say, I think I played Picpoul with a couple of school kids. Like, you set up a couple of nets and a ball, and you play Picpoul.
And the Catalan version of Picpoul tends to be more similar to what we make, but you're absolutely right. Ultimately, in California, if you want to make a Picpoul like you would find in France, you'd almost have to be like in Carneros or Western Sonoma.
Yeah.
But they're not doing it.
No. It would be given its late ripeness, I imagine it's a grape that could do well in some cooler but more temperate areas. Like Washington State would be a really interesting place for them to grow Picpoul. But I just wonder if they have enough heat index days to get it to full ripeness. If
That is a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, this by the way, you guys are drinking the 23, and we held this back specifically for you guys because we've sold out of it for a while at the winery. But we just bottled 24 like Friday. Yeah,
Friday.
last week.
Nice.
So the 24 is hot on its heels. And
what
I
are
think-
go ahead, Liz. Sorry.
No, but I think that the 23, sometimes the wines need a little time to kind of settle, and it's just tasting so bright and fresh. And
Yeah,
that's the problem with some of our wines that we do such limited production, only 168 cases. Sometimes by the time they're really hitting their stride, they're gone, they're sold out,
Yeah.
But yeah. But
And you guys specifically with the Tizona line, I mean, you've sort of very particularly decided to make these small batch wines. You're not doing larger lots. I think the largest one we have is like 200 250 cases, something like that.
Yeah, they're all very small small lots, specifically for just for the wine club and for the tasting room. Mm-hmm.
I love it. No, this one is beautiful. I think you're absolutely right. Like, raw seafood, fried foods, calamari would go amazing with this. I think a cheese course, because of that high acidity to counteract the fattiness of it, there's just so much. Like a bagna cotta would be amazing with this.
I have a little Briat Savarine triple cream downstairs, maybe later.
There you go.
This with a triple cream.
Oh yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even like a cold grilled vegetable, which I know is very, very popular in France for lunch, to have the buffet with the terrine of charcuterie and pâtés, and then you have the cold the squash that's been grilled and laid out and whatnot, would be delicious with this. So it's fantastic. And
But I
yeah,
have to tell you something about Picpoul.
please.
It's one of the hardest grapes to grow. It is so difficult. Oh my God. If you look at it sideways just a little bit, it'll rot on you. So you have to like virtually dry farm it. You have to, and that's where Lodi really comes in, because we don't have that coastal wetness, right? We have a little bit more of a kind of a dry, not a lot of during the growing season, we don't have a lot of mist in the mornings, and thank God we don't. And so we can actually ripen Picpoul pretty well at low yields, but it is a very difficult variety to grow. It's nothing like, let's say, Cabernet or Tempranillo that just kind of makes itself, right? It's a tough variety, and we love those things. Like Graciano, we love those things because ultimately they have these just amazing things that they give, but you have to work to get it to that position.
That's really interesting, because I know here in Paso Robles, Picpoul has become more and more popular, but you very rarely hear people talk about just the difficulty of growing it, and you don't hear about it as a real late ripener. So that's some really interesting.
It's a late ripener, one of the latest ripening whites, and one of the most prone to disease. So you have to be very, very cautious with it.
Is that because of like tight bunches and smaller bunches, or why is it?
That's exactly it. Really tight bunches, thin skins. It's almost like the white version of Zinfandel. You just have to always be literally walking the vineyard. Once you get beyond veraison, you've got to be walking the vineyard every week. And if one cluster touches another, you will get rot. So you have to remove any cluster that touches another. You just have to be really on top of it. But if you do that, you're golden. You're great.
Well, it's especially interesting that it's super high in acidity as a late ripener.
Yeah.
Just that it doesn't lose its acidity, or the acidity is so high that that's why it can be a late ripener.
Yeah, it's like I could only imagine the like crazy hockey stick style graph for this one, where you're like jump up in the acid right there.
Yes, yeah. It's very reminiscent to two red varieties like Barbera and Graciano that retain their acidity so well. Roussanne retains its acidity real well, the white variety, but few varieties do that, and this is one of them. Yeah.
Carignan.
Cheers.
Carignan. All right, we're moving on. I was going to throw out the last little question, which is that why isn't Picpoul used more as a blending grape, given it's such this like natural delivery source for acidity to pair with something like you don't see many Viognier Picpouls or Marsanne Picpouls, but it sounds like those would be two natural grapes that would go together, one to add the acidity, one to add more of that rich, fuller body. But maybe I'm talking out of turn here.
I don't know why.
Well, in Europe, it's not done because of
regionality.
Regionality, exactly. And in California, it's not done because Picpoul is, if there's 200 acres of Picpoul in California, I'd be amazed. So it's something that is really, I remember 10 years ago, it was like the Psalms, cool grape, right?
Yes.
And it's still really still is in that category. So if you're looking for acidity, then you're going to go for something that is either, I mean, I hate to say it, either more available,
Right.
or
You're going to pick something earlier and just like let it.
you're gonna pick something earlier. You're gonna get like a Sauvignon Blanc,
Yeah.
pick it early at 18 bricks. You have a steely acidity, and you're gonna add it into something that you're doing. As long as it's under 25%, you can still call it whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Picpoul would not fall into that category. And by saying that, also, it's very important to understand that, like Sauvignon Blanc, as an example, it's like Cabernet Sauvignon, right? It's an easy grape to grow. It doesn't rot. It's just so easy to farm. So why would you get something like Picpoul that is tending towards rotting and whatnot? You
Right.
know, it's just an easier grape to manage. And in our, commoditized wine business, that would be the choice that people would go towards. But it's a completely different grape and a completely different aromatic profile that you just don't get.
Yeah, absolutely.
Picpoul is just so unique. So
Nice.
I don't think it'll ever break out from being a unique little subset, very interesting white variety.
No, it's true. And it feels like it's really been kind of just subjugated to Lodi and Paso. I mean, you're not seeing much of it in Santa Barbara, certainly not Monterey County, Sonoma, any of those places. It feels like it's only in those, real hot areas. I'm surprised Temecula hasn't jumped on it, given their heat index days and the need for a more acidic white. But again, they're growing to what the masses want, so that kind of makes sense there. But
where I would see Picpoul really flourishing is in Lake County, and
oh,
it's
yeah.
not there.
Mm-hmm. I can
It's
see that.
not,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's at higher elevation. They get a lot of heat. Yeah, absolutely. I could see that.
yeah.
Definitely. Do they have to worry about moisture though? That would be the question. Is like
Lake County is super dry.
Is
Lake
it?
County, oh my God. Like it is it's a savanna. It's dry. It's a high elevation savanna.
Yeah.
And you get tremendous concentration with fruit from Lake County. And I mean, honestly, like when Jed Steele started years ago before, I mean, he was doing Sauvignon Blancs there, and it's some of
Yeah.
the best Sauvignon Blancs in the state come from Lake County.
Yeah.
And so I would think that Picpoul would be a natural for that area, but I'm not aware of anyone who's really done anything there. So
Yeah, interesting.
yeah.
Well, let's move over to the unofficial, although I feel like we should make it official, mascot grape of the Forgotten Grapes Wine Club, because I'm pretty certain we have featured more versions of Old Vine Carignan than any other grape that we've dealt with, and certainly any other wine club out there. So let's talk about yours from the Mule Plain Vineyard, which, like, just throw that into an AI generator and see what it pops out.
Yeah.
But I love it. How did you discover this vineyard and this Carignan?
Okay, so
Or Carignan, I should say, because it's now officially known as Carignan.
The Carrigan.
yeah, so
Carignan grape.
the first thing I do when I approach like we grow our own grapes, except with very, very, very few instances where we buy grapes. And when we go to buy grapes from a grower, if I go to a grower that's growing Carignan and I say, hey, I'd like to buy your grapes. If I say, hey, I want to buy your Carignan, I'll get a better deal.
You gotta talk like the people.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Oh,
so
you
is
want
it
to buy
Vonier or
Carignan?
Vonier?
So that's the first thing. But actually, this Old Vine Carignan comes from a vineyard that was planted in 1933, right after Prohibition was repealed, by the Shin family. Shin, Shinn. And the Shin family emigrated to Lodi back in the late 1850s. So they came basically shortly after the gold rush. and they've been in Lodi on the west side forever. And now there's, oh my God, there's got to be 80 different Shin members of the family on the west side of Lodi. And they all have pieces of land, parcels of land next to each other. And 2 years ago, I approached John Shin, who's a 5th generation farmer, and I heard that he was going to go into teaching, and he was thinking about selling his property, the Mule Plain Vineyard Carignan. And I said, John, we'd like to buy your vineyard. And he looked at me. He said, can I get back to you? I'm like, sure, yeah, no problem. He called me the next day and he goes, you took me by surprise. All my relatives here, when we sell land, we never let it get on the market. We sell it amongst each other because we're all Shins. So if I were to sell to you, it might shorten your life.
I assume he was going to make you marry into the family, and suddenly you're going to announce that you're a polygamist here. You have a Shin wife who you keep on the vineyard.
Had I said, "Oh, Liz is a Shin," they'd be like,
there you go,
scrolling through, like, well, how's she related to us?
Although I have heard that the Shins have a blood feud rivalry with the Femur family, so you know.
Yeah, and the tibias. The tibias are, oh my God, they're on
do
the
not
other
mess
side
with the
of
tibias. Yeah, they will mess you up.
So anyhow, this is a beautiful old vine Carignan, and when I discovered Lodi for the first time in 1990, it was because, you know, Joe Phelps and I were flying over the Cessna looking at North Coast vineyards for basically Southern Rhone varietals. And then when I went to Lodi, he goes, I'm not going to fly you over there. That's flatland. You can figure out what you're going to do. So I went over and I drove around everywhere. I met all these people. I'm like, I want to buy 2 varieties from Lodi. I want to buy Carignan and I want to buy Black Malbec.
Black Malvoise. Malvoise. Yes.
Which is Senso. Yeah. And so in Lodi, they're like Black Malbec. And there were like 6 vineyards of Black Malbec. And there were about 20 vineyards of Carignan. And today there's 1 vineyard of Senso.
Yes, the Bechtold Vineyard. My Mecca, my favorite place on earth.
Yeah. There's only 1 left. And there's only 3 Carignans left. And the Mule Plain Vineyard is one of the Carignans that are left. And it's located on Davis Road, just south of Peltier, in the center of West Lodi, sandy loam, beautiful. And John Shin,
too. Is it own rooted?
Own rooted, yes, own rooted. And John Shin's grandfather planted it in 1932 on the year of the repeal of Prohibition and sold it to Gallo for 60 years. And then his sons, Bill Shin, took it over. And then his son, John Shin, who I buy the fruit from, took it over. And John's probably about 10 years younger than I am, and he's farming this beautiful old vine Carignan vineyard. Gorgeous, now it's almost getting close to 100 years old. And it's a beautiful head train vineyard. I mean, Carignan, okay, just for those of you who don't know this, the idea of having 100% planting of any vineyard is a modern anomaly from the 1980s.
Yep.
Prior to that, every old vineyard had a mixture of varietals in it. So an old vine Zinfandel had Carignan and Petite Syrahs and, 4 different varietals.
You're talking about field blends as opposed to putting all your eggs in one basket.
Well, no, It was like if a vine died, you would just go borrow cuttings from your neighbor and plant that because you just had to have something in that
Right,
spot.
I get that. But there's the field blends where it was all interplanted and then it got all blended together into one wine.
Yeah, but you're right. You're absolutely right, including white varieties. But I
Right.
will tell you one really interesting thing about Carignan, and that is that Carignan is highly, highly, highly susceptible to powdery mildew.
Mhm.
And so every vineyard in the area always had Carignan interspersed in it prior to the 1950s.
Oh, it was the canary in the coal mine, wasn't it?
Because
If it
it
got
was the
powdery mildew.
canary in the coal mine.
Hmm.
As soon as you saw mildew on the Carignan, you had to go in and dust the entire vineyard.
Really? I didn't know that story.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And the Carignan is a very upright growth vine. You
Mhm.
walk through a vineyard, an old vine Zinfandel, and every vine that has shoots that are screaming up to the sky, they're Carignans. The
Interesting.
Zinfandels are like, eh. The Petit Syrahs are really tiny. All these other varieties just have their own little thing, but the Carignans just scream to the sky. And they're also very, very mildew susceptible.
It's like
And
the
so,
Cialis of vines.
yeah, yeah, that's the Alice of vines. Yeah, exactly. And in the old days, the guys would put a whole bunch of sulfur in an old sock, and they go to the Carignans and shake the sock on top of the Carignans to give them a little extra sulfur because they knew they needed it so that they wouldn't get mildewed. So the Carignan, so to see a 100% Carignan vineyard is very difficult. The vineyard that we buy from is about 90% Carignan, and then there's a little bit of Counois and all different varieties in it. But it's a very, I mean, it is, again, it's one of the few remaining Carignan vineyards in Lodi, and it's absolutely stunningly beautiful. And until 10 years ago, it was a Gallo contract at $350 a ton. And
Jesus.
only, and here's another thing to think about. Growers, good people, and they're good farmers,
Right.
but they're not necessarily good marketers.
No, they're not good business people if they're only getting $350 a ton.
Well,
for
just
the
give it
seed.
perspective. Marcus, give it perspective. $350 a ton for Carignan in Lodi. So what goes for a lot in Lodi? What?
Cab Franc, which is probably
Cab Franc.
one of the more expensive.
Well,
yeah.
How much is Cab Franc a ton on average?
Okay, so it's funny you should mention Cab Franc because Sebastiani vineyards came in the 90s and flooded a whole bunch of growers with Cab Franc, and they all ripped it out because the best Cab Franc comes from the foothills. Cab Franc in Lodi is not the best.
Okay, so what is the
But-
most dominant grape? Because I can't
but
say
like-
Old Vine Zin because, you know.
No.
Old Vine-
Like, for example, Cabernet is a very, very, it does really well.
It's a prevalent grape.
And you're going to get anywhere between, you know, for production farming for large wineries, $600 to $800 a ton, so over double. Okay, but if you do what we're doing, like unique varieties that hardly anyone does, you double that, so you're at $1,600 a ton,
Yeah.
which is
For
still
Cabernet or for your.
No, for
like
Malbec,
Rossignol,
yeah,
Tempranillo, you know,
for your Petit Verdot, your
Blanc,
Malbec,
Petit
stuff like that.
Verdot, you're going to get $1,600 a ton, which is 1/3 to 1/5 of what you would get if you were growing those grapes in the North Coast.
But now we're paying for the Old Vine Carignan 1,700 a ton,
Yeah, for the Old Vine Carignan, we're paying $1,500 a ton,
1,500
Yeah,
a ton.
It's still, I mean,
but it's like,
your yields are super small. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the
Right.
trade-off with Old Vine Carignan is if you're getting, gosh, half a ton per acre, a quarter ton per acre, you're probably on
we
the plus
do
side.
not want them to lose the vineyard. I mean, I
Yeah.
tell you, when I showed up in Lodi in 1990 and I saw all these gorgeous Old Vine vineyards, and I'm like, how do we save this? How do we save
And it's
this?
so beautiful. It's delicate. It's kind of like goes, people that come to
Oh.
a tasting room, it kind of goes in that direction of maybe like a really nice light Pinot Noir, it really fits a certain profile in our tasting room. And
Yeah.
and we, a vine like that, you just have to go into it so respectfully. You don't want to manipulate you get what you get out of the vineyard, and we let it go through native yeast fermentation, all neutral oak, and we just treat it very delicately because we just want it to, be what it is. And it's just,
You know, Liz, that's a really good point because with the Tizona program, we want to highlight the fruit. We don't want to mask it. So you're absolutely right. Native yeast fermentation, neutral oak. So what you're doing is you're tasting the terroir. You're tasting the vineyard.
Mm-hmm.
And this is
Yeah.
what Carignan does in Lodi. And it's
Well, old vine Carignan in general should all be neutral oak, even stainless or concrete. I mean, it should have just zero, there's so much flavor in the tiny berries, that little bit of juice that's so intensified with that, thinner but still fruitful skin that it absolutely should be. I mean, Old Vine Carignan is my third favorite grape of all time, and you're talking to somebody who
Yeah.
puts
Okay.
Cinsault as their first favorite grape of all time, and makes a sparkling Cinsault rosé under my sparkling brand. But yeah, it's amazing. I say this every time we pour one on these virtual tastings. It is the best steak wine of all time. You will find no better wine to pair with a steak, because it's got that great acidity that cuts through. There's still a little hint of tannin to pair off with the fattiness, and it just has that savory herbaceousness, to pair with the fruit. It's just a beautiful, gorgeous wine. I'm so glad that you guys are helping to preserve these old vineyards, because it really is, this amazing legacy that we have here in California. And we're so prone in the state to tear things down and build up new, as opposed to, our brethren on the East Coast and even in the South, and certainly over in Europe, that there needs to be a preservation. We need to be holding on to these old vines and doing what we can to help them thrive and continue. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Well, I mean, I think that, it's an unfair playing field here with these old vines, and they're really part of California history. And I think that, I think it should be recognized as a historic landmark. I mean, these vineyards, because if people can't and economically afford to keep them, and once they're gone forever. And we see that happening in Lodi, and we see these old vines coming out because, people are just not able to continue with them. And I think this is where we, I don't know, like you get recognition for old buildings and historic landmarks, and these historic vineyards should also receive some assistance, I think, to keep them alive.
They don't garner as much money as they should. So for wine drinkers, for all these enthusiasts that are here right now, look for old vines, because they are one of the best values you're going to get, because you can get these incredible wines in the kind of $40 range. It really should be more, because those vines don't produce a lot of fruit.
Yeah.
Their yields are less. They take more care. They're usually more likely organically farmed, because of the fact that they're still producing and they've been around. So I mean, there's a real
It is,
they
but
don't
it's that
yield enough, and people are going to pull them out to put in things that yield more if we don't support old vines.
Yeah.
But it's also that dichotomy where if we suddenly start selling old vine Carignans for $100, $120, $150, $200 a bottle, which, given the yields of those vineyards, could certainly be appropriate, you're going to price yourself out of them unless you make that. It's like, I used to go pay $10 to see 10 bands at Old World Village in Huntington Beach, and one of those bands was No Doubt. And now, rather than go to the Intuit Dome in Inglewood and pay, $250 for a nosebleed seat to see them, like, I hearken back to the old days. But you have to allow the evolution, but at the same time, you don't want it to stifle everything.
Well, the thing is, we want to say that the issue, and there is there's an preservation of old vine association out of Lodi that they want to do because they have these, but if we don't care for them, people will rip them up to do higher yields, and it won't be like we should have paid more. It's that they'll be gone, and you can't bring history back once it's destroyed.
You cannot. No, never.
It's true. Yeah. And it's one of those things that like, yeah, the state should definitely step in the same way that they do with historical buildings and say, you know, you cannot tear out these vines unless you go through several commissions to changes. Because I know like Charbonneau is a grape that is just in severe decline, and that was a staple of the California wine industry, you know, back in the from the 1800s up until the 1980s, and you're having fewer and fewer Charbonneau vineyards out there. So
Yeah. And Charbonneau is a delicious.
it is I've had some amazing
So
Charbonneau
good.
wines that will put, you know, no offense to your Joseph Phelps Napa brethren, but they will put, you know, those wines to shame. So
Well, we used to buy Charbonneau when I was working at Phelps. We'd go to Dunawheel Lane, and there was this Italian family that had head-trained old Charbonneau, and I
In
was
Napa?
in Napa,
Wow.
Good
in
God.
actually just south of St. Helena and
I'm
in
sure that's not there anymore.
Dunawheel Lane, and I would go there and I would buy these head-trained Charbonneaus, 2 ton to the acre. We got about 20 tons of it. And it took about 3 years of working with the family before the son came up to me. And at that point, I was 27 and he was probably 40. And he said,
He was old.
he was old. He was old. And he
senior
came up to
citizen
me
at 40. Yeah.
and he said, hey, Marcus, you want to come over this weekend? I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, oh, we're going to fire up the still. We're going to make some grappa.
Oh, wow.
And it was an old Italian family. And
Mhm.
of course, it was completely illegal. They had a still in their basement and they would make grappa and from the Charbonneau. And I'm like, oh my God, this is unreal. This is so fantastic. So, yeah, but Charbonneau and Grignolino. Oh,
Grinolino,
Grignolino.
nice. Oh, I used to sell
Yeah.
the Heights Grinolino at my old wine shop, which was one of the few Grinolinos I could find.
Yeah,
Just
that was so delicious. It was so. It was,
I don't think I've ever had a Grignolino.
Grignolino is one of the sexiest wines out there. It is
It's so good. It is
The-
so good.
the way that I felt when you were describing the Charbonneau vineyards, and I almost turned off my camera for a few minutes. I feel like Allison's that way about Grinolino. So
I mean, the first time I had a Grignolino in Piemonte, I was like, what is this in front of me? I mean, just the color, the aromas, the acidity, the savory. I mean, it was everything. And if you're ever looking to try a great Grignolino domestic, Idlewild Wines up in Sonoma, Sam Bilbro, his tasting room in Hillsburg, he makes a freaking amazing Grignolino.
Sam Bilbro?
Sam Bilbro of Bilbro, yes.
Yeah.
He's one of the boys, but he also does a Fresia, but the Grignolino is.
That's good to know. I was good friends with his dad, Chris Bilbro.
Yeah.
Nice guy. Nice,
Yeah.
great family.
Yeah,
Oh,
3
that's
nice
good to know.
talented sons.
Oh, that's really good to know. Sam Bilbro.
Idlewild Grignolino.
We should order some of that.
And then you can start an Italian line.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm feeling, yeah, you guys need to plant some
Then our
Algarosa,
whole
some
DG
Grinolino,
is
some
gonna quit.
Ruche. Like, let's do this.
Can I-
Legrine, Sagrantino.
All right,
Allison and I will consult on the
let's move on to
we'll call it
Picpoul.
Il Tizona.
Oh yeah. Il Tizoni.
No, it would be La Tizona if there's an A at the end.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Yes, let's talk about the Sisu Vineyard Syrah, because I know Liz, to you, this is a very special wine with a lot of homespun sentimentality.
Yes, it really does. The Sisu, it's named the Sisu because that's a Finnish word. My dad was Finnish. My grandparents were immigrants from Finland. They came to the United States in around 1915 and immigrated separately, actually, and met each other in Berkeley in the 1920 and got married. My dad was born down in Hemet, in the
Oh.
Los Angeles area.
Inland
And
Empire represent. We got a lot of IE people here. So
all right, awesome. So my dad grew up down there. He graduated from Venice Beach High School, surfer, blonde hair, But anyways, my dad had a lot of Sisu, and Sisu is a Finnish word that is means kind of a quiet, stoic determination in the face of all hardships.
mhm.
That's kind of Finland for you when you think about the cold and
Oh,
the dark
yep.
and having that, kind
And
of
how-
like a true grit,
How tough reindeer meat is.
Tough,
Absolutely.
yeah. We love reindeer meat. We love cold water after
Fermented
saunas.
fish.
Yes. So my when Marcus and I came back from that trip in the VW bus, we came back in 1994. We left in 93, we came back
In
in
90, December 93.
93. And we were just so bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. In 1994, we wanted to plant a vineyard. We could not wait. We were just so excited about everything. And we didn't have, we'd borrow money from my parents and your mother to just get home. And but nothing was going to stop
Get the
us.
bus back.
Get the bus back.
Get the bus back.
And we were like, we want to plant a vineyard. Mom, Dad, can we plant a vineyard at your house? We've got family property on my mom's side, 5 generations going back, pioneer roots, covered wagons from Ireland and Wales. And so they got land. So we're like, can we plant a vineyard out on the property in Lincoln in Placer County, just north of Sacramento? And my dad and mom were like, sure, Marcus, here's a shovel. And we literally, my dad and Marcus literally dug every hole to plant every vine in this almost 1 acre vineyard. I mean, my dad pickaxed
It's amazing. Yeah.
the
To be-
irrigation
To be
line.
clear, though, one thing that she's not saying is that while we dug the holes, Liz and her mother planted
Ah.
every vine and put the soil back in the holes.
Mhm.
1,000 vines, 1,000 holes, 1,000
We were the
stakes.
crew. It was just us. I mean, we did not have any.
There was no ditch witch. There was none of that.
Yeah, there was no ditch witch. No, that my dad
My-
would never pay for that. The Finns are very, very.
My
frugal.
father-in-law, Doug, he came out with the pickaxe and he's like, we're gonna dig the trench now. I'm like, sure. We were digging the trench and then
It's gonna start there. It's gonna end there. We're digging the whole thing.
I was 31 and he was 65
Wow.
and he could dig a ditch better than I could. I'm like, oh, she's, I gotta keep up. I've gotta keep up. He was an amazing guy. And
Yeah, so
and-
we wanted to plant a varietal collection because at that time we
Yeah.
thought, oh, let's plant. So we did some varietal collection and part of the vineyard, and then we did Syrah for the balance because you knew in that area of Lincoln, it's a little warmer climate. and-
Syrah would do well.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. In fact, the painting behind us is one of my dad's. He was a high school art
Oh,
teacher.
there you go.
Yeah.
There you
Oh,
go.
nice.
High school art teacher, and he was also a craftsman and
Wow.
painted and built our house and just, very industrious guy. But yeah, so we named it the Sisu Syrah after my dad and my mom also working very diligently. There's a saying in Finland, like, there's a joke, like you have like old rags and the wife throws away these old rags and it's like, why did you throw away those perfectly good rags? My dad would use everything, recycled lumber for our home. We have, railroad ties and train car windows and
Oh, wow.
very, very, very cool
The home is an
house.
It was recycling and renewable energy, renewables before that was popular.
Yeah,
Oh, totally.
It's this 3-story house slanted on a hillside, entirely built with recycled materials in the
Wow.
60s.
Wow.
Mhm.
It's a beautiful home. but it's only beautiful if you recognize how beautiful it is. Liz grew up in it. She's like, well, doesn't every kid grow up in a like this?
I remember my dad in the 70s, like energy prices got really high,
Mhm.
and he took our electric oven and threw it out, and they went to wood stove, and
Oh, wow.
we cooked on a wood stove for all of my later years. I got out of the house really fast. As soon as I graduated from high school, I'm going to Davis. I'm gonna get
It's why you felt fine cooking salmon in a VW bus.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
lived in a house with a wood burning stove. It's like, yeah, fire that thing up. I'm gonna cook this salmon on the carburetor. Let's make
No
this happen.
problem. I can do it.
I gotta tell you though, I mean, I had to prove how to start a fire before Liz would even consider seriously marrying me.
Women should have, requirements for a man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Starting a fire is one of them.
So, well, Marcus making his magic happen. The first year the vineyard came into production, he sold it to Schaefer Vineyard in Napa Valley. Schaefer was wanting to experiment with Syrah. They had a vineyard that they had planted, but they didn't have any grapes. So the first vintage of this Syrah went over to Schaefer.
Doug Schaefer, yeah.
And they used it for
3 years. And they
a
made
couple
their
years.
Yeah, they had their Schaefer Syrah was ours from our vineyard until theirs came into production.
Wow.
And and then it went to Terra Rouge, Bill Easton, and he had it for 20 years. And then we finally got it back.
Yeah, we did, because Bill, this fruit, because of the area up in Placer County, it's a warmer climate, and it would come in a lot earlier than the rest of Bill's fruit. Sometimes as early as Labor Day weekend. So finally, Bill said, I can't, it's just too, we're still bottling, it's just so early.
Yeah.
And it was their inaugural vintage that they would bring in to their winery. I mean, they would foot stomp it because it gets very, beyond dimpled. This vineyard, it gets very extracted fruit, and so they would foot stomp it and kind of inaugurate their vintage every year with it. But he decided to bow out, and that's when we were like, I think it was it 2018?
2018.
We were able to bring it back, and by that time we had our own facility.
Right.
And so my dad passed in 2010, but it was really beautiful to see this come full circle back into our own hands and into our own winery. And we just absolutely love this fruit because there is this rustic quality to it that is.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I've been I shouldn't say this out loud, but I've been very down on California Syrah over the last 4 or 5 years because I feel like we're almost too warm an environment for good Syrah. A good Syrah should be a challenging wine. It should have that tar, that brambly fruit, some bacon notes, smokiness, but it should not be an easy drink. It should be something that pairs with food and have a little bit of a fight back to it. And
there's some good, cool climate Syrah coming out of Santa Maria Valley, Santa Rita Hills.
That's good to know. Yeah. But this is one of the first ones I've tasted in a while that has a lot of those components. There's some of those darker notes, a little bit of that tar note that I pick up on this, that it's just a beautiful Syrah in terms of its elegance, its richness, but at the same time, it's not overly extracted, too fruity, that some of the, particularly in my region, some of the Syrahs that are coming out of there are just these gigantic fruit bombs that I just can't fathom anymore.
I'm actually really liking the texture and how it just sort of, you get the juiciness. I mean, it's rich, but it's got this great acidity, but a textured acidity that's kind of dancing on the tongue.
It's lean, which I like. It's not lush like a lot of the modern Syrahs are. There's a steeliness to it that's nice.
There's like a barely a tad of Viognier in it, like because Marcus did the Viognier planting at the bottom of that vineyard. But I mean, I would say
It's maybe
maybe
2%.
maybe
And
probably even
and it's like kind of like a Condrieu where we add a little bit of the Viognier into it. But it's really just
I guess that would be more of a Côte Rôtie because Condrieu is all Viognier, and this would be more like Côte Rôtie with
Oh,
the
Côte
Yeah.
Rôtie.
Yeah.
Mhm.
it's just a little touch of Viognier.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons why it ripens so early is because the soils are decomposed granites. Like if you think about like Hermitage, which is granitic, it has this connection to those acidic soils, and it does very well in acidic soils. And so, and at the same time, the soils are very depleted. So if we get maybe on average 2 tons to the acre, we're doing well. That's a good yield for that vineyard. And so it ripens relatively quickly because of the low yield in California. But because it ripens quickly, it has this really high acidity.
Yeah.
Right. It has this really high balanced acidity. A lot of the Syrahs that are grown in deeper soils tend to ripen later and then don't have that kind of that tickle, that high note that you can get.
They're flabbier.
Yeah, they're flabbier. So it turned out to be a really good varietal for the area, and we're lucky to be able to get it. And we do very little of it, and there's no more to be done. I mean, it's just a small little 1 acre vineyard. So
and this is your vineyard, right? You guys own this vineyard? I mean,
My mom, it's on her property.
Still part of the family, though. Yeah.
It's part of the family, yeah.
So you don't have to worry about her going to, Gallo or Treasury or anybody and being like, hey, let's make a deal.
Yeah, right.
I flew around with a Cessna looking,
right, exactly. Yeah.
No, this is
Steve Mathiasen was flying around in his ultralight and landed on this property and said, I want that Syrah. This is delicious. And like I said, this is kind of reaffirming my belief in California Syrah. So thank you for that. It is kind of bringing me back, and apparently the foothills of the Sierras is where I needed to go to have that reaffirmed. So
yeah, and you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with the Bill Easton and Terre Rouge winery, and he's got multiple Syrahs, but he has one that's called the Côte de l'Ouest, which are the Western Hills, which is basically this vineyard was part of it, and our vineyard in Terra Alta is the balance of that program. And now that program is our fruit, the Côte de l'Ouest Syrah.
Yeah.
But he makes a very extracted big wine. That's more of his direction. Yeah.
I think Allison's hitting it in the chat. That this is a typical nose, like red and black fruits. There's some brambliness to it, like that kind of thorny green note, the savory.
It doesn't have the irony, kind of blood or meatiness, but it has a savoriness. It's just not getting into that kind of red meat irony taste.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is kind of like where I want to go to lamb and other, with rosemary infused.
Yeah,
and I think it has a little some brown spices in there, some baking, cooking spices. So if you're cooking with with rosemary and things like that, it'll kind of bring it out in the wine.
I made a really delicious that when you do the pears in wine, and I did the pears in the Syrah. That was really good as well. Yeah.
That sounds delicious. Yeah, I think this, with really anything stewed, like not just like an ossobuco or a beef stew, but just something that's been braised for long periods of time. You have that intensity of flavors. I think this is particularly with that acidity. I mean, that's what to me sets this Syrah apart from a lot of those, is that that brighter acidity that that you get. There's that leanness that really separates it that I think is delicious. So I know we're getting low on time. We're approaching 8 o'clock. So let's move on to our last wine, which is the
Move on to Malbec.
Road 20 Malbec, or do we have a, is this a Malbec, or what are we calling this one? Because we have crazy names for all the wines.
Just Malbec, I guess.
Malbec. This comes from a vineyard that is 2 miles north of our home here in Lodi. And we are in the classic old vine Zinfandel area of Lodi with soils that are called Tokay sandy loam.
Mhm.
Sandy loams go down 40 feet. If you go north of us, you get into these old vineyard, these terraces that are basically old alluvial deposits that have clay.
Okay.
And so there's this soil called the San Joaquin clay loam. And in fact, it is our state soil. You can go and look at your state bird, your
State soil.
state, mineral, your state soil,
Flower. We have a state flower. Yep.
state flower. So the San Joaquin clay loam is the California state soil. Why, I have no idea, but it is a beautiful clay loam. And so it tends to do very well with Malbec. And Malbec is a varietal that is, for most people probably know, it comes from Cahors, France, where they call it Côte,
Right.
and it eventually migrated over to Bordeaux to become one of the 5 major Bordeaux red varietals. And then it emigrated to Argentina, where it created phenomenal standalone wines. I mean, youidn't really get any. I mean, Malbec was always a minor player in Bordeaux.
Yeah.
And then back in the 90s, we started bringing it up to California. And some people, I know Phelps, we had 12 vines of it, and I harvested all the vines and I put them in a trash can and I stomped them and I made a wine from it. And we were trying to figure out whether Malbec should be a component of our Cabernet blends. And we decided that it could not, because it was too acidic and too tannic. But in Lodi, the Malbec tends to soften its tannins and be much more approachable. And so, not surprisingly, now the vast majority of Malbec in the nation is grown in the Lodi area. Now, you'll never see Malbec as a varietal name on most wines because it goes into a lot of the French blends and it goes into different products. But we, being one of the very first growers to plant Malbec in the Lodi area, thought, this is a standalone. So on these San Joaquin clay loam soils where it does so well, which by the way, where Tempranillo does so well too, we thought, let's make a standalone wine. And so this is where this comes from. And we just absolutely love it. We are very enamored with the varietal. I think part of our love for this varietal was that 15 years ago, we went down to Argentina and we tasted some Malbecs from Argentina. Prior to that, we had only tasted Malbecs that were for the export market. And we found the Malbecs of Argentina to be superb, beautiful, gorgeous tannins. Some of them in the south, cooler climates were almost Pinot Noir-like. Some of them further north in the warmer climates tended to be more meatier, like like what we create. And we thought, what a versatile variety.
I would say more asteroid than meteor, but I know what you're getting at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meteor, not meteor.
I know, yes. I couldn't resist. Sorry.
Yeah. Is Pluto a planet?
Yes. The answer is yes.
Okay.
But anyway, continue about Malbec, because I have noticed that, I mean, here in Paso Robles, it seems to be planted almost predominantly on the east side. You know, it's a warm weather grape. People sort of equate it with Cab Franc and Petit Verdot, and that it needs a long time to ripen. It brings out a lot more of those floral notes. Obviously, you lose the acidity, but I think that's kind of what people like about it is they want that like richness, heavy fruit characteristic, floral nose, but that like softer tannin, kind of almost a side note to Cabernet Sauvignon.
Mm. It is true. It's a very late ripening varietal. In fact, here's a little funny thing you should all know about. In Argentina, they have extremely calm springs and kind of radically different falls.
Well, they're on the southern hemisphere, so it's like a switch.
In California, we have crazy springs and very calm falls.
Mhm.
And so in the early 90s, when Malbec was being planted first and foremost in the Lodi area, we planted all these Malbecs that was from Argentina that was used to these very calm springs. So fruit set was a given. You bring it to Lodi or anywhere in the North Coast, anywhere in the Central Coast, with these changes and frost and degree days and craziness, you would get shatter. You would get very low yields in the Malbec. And so the University of California, Davis said, we've got to figure this out because people are really thinking about planting Malbec in California. And how can we get more consistent yields? And so in the 90s, there were these clones that came from Argentina that didn't really work well. And then in the early 2000s, they came out with a whole new series of clones that were able to sustain flowering during these inclement moments in California.
Were they brought over from Cahors? Because I imagine the French versions of Malbec would be more attuned to, you know, huge variances in springs because that's more of that northern hemisphere climate.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I don't know. It could very well be.
Should we take our VW bus and find out?
I think we should.
I think you guys need to do,
I think
you know, Cahors, the Dordogne, the Maturin to do Tannat, you know, get up into the Frontenac, do some Negrette. I think so.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
we need to reenact it.
And
Well,
you guys either need a podcast or, you know, to Instagram it, to do a
Yeah.
Snapchat story.
Gotta pay for the voyage.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, once they figured out, okay, we've got the wrong clones, then Malbec became really popular here. But
Yeah.
it all went into blends.
Yeah.
You know, the fact of the matter is that probably 5% of all Malbecs actually get bottled as Malbec, and the rest go into blends. This is
Which is-
100% Malbec.
Which is so weird to me because it's become so ubiquitous thanks to Argentina in the same way that, you know, Carmenere was rediscovered via Chile and has become a staple in wine shops that
Yeah.
I'm just shocked that more California wineries haven't sort of embraced Malbec as an alternative single varietal to Cab Sauv to Merlot. I mean, it seems like it could be sort of the power three of Bordeaux with Cab Franc and Petit Verdot kind of bringing up the rear. But you're right, all of it goes. It's the one grape that it's never sort of taken off like it feels like it should have.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Given
Exactly.
its name recognition, because you know, you throw Malbec out to most people, they're like, "Oh yeah, I know Malbec, Argentina, blah blah blah," and California just hasn't embraced it.
No, it hasn't. And we're one of the very few that make an Malbec, and we just love it.
I think people don't really get a lot of good examples of Malbec because they usually get some really cheap stuff at Trader Joe's, and it's not going to be their turn on wine, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's
No.
just not enough good producers that people get their hands on it. But
Argentina did to Malbec, not that there aren't beautiful Argentine Malbecs, what Australian Shiraz did to Syrah, where people who taste a lot of wine know that Shiraz from Australia, and there are great ones in Australia.
Right.
But I mean, those mass-produced animals on the label, super cheap. I mean, like, if you don't explore the world of wine and taste a lot of wines, and that's what you drink, it's not exciting you to go taste another one or to spend more money on a different one. You're kind of like, like, didn't like it at
Yeah.
$2.99. Don't really want to see what $7.99 does.
Sure, yeah,
Allison,
absolutely.
you're totally right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I think that Malbec, like for example, you know, when Liz and I, with our friends who are Argentine, said, unfortunately, they didn't drink wine, but they're like, come visit us
Wait.
in Argentina.
That's like having a vegan Argentinian. That's just that doesn't compute.
They drink other things,
Oh, they love
beer
whiskey.
and whiskey.
Beer and
Okay.
whiskey.
All right,
And so we went down and we didn't ever go to Mendoza and all that stuff. And Liz and I ever, you know, we were like, let's just, you know, one night or two, let's just go to a wine bar in Buenos Aires and taste what they have. And the Malbecs that we tasted in Argentina had nothing to do with the Malbecs
Yeah.
that Argentina was exporting to California and to the United States. I mean, they were amazing. And they were making Malbecs in like Nequén, which is in southern Argentina, which is like growing Malbec in Canada, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, they're just doing all like high elevation Malbecs, all kinds of crazy stuff. And the Malbecs were phenomenal. And no one in California, but none of that stuff left California unless you're ready to pay like $150 a
None of it
bottle.
left Argentina.
I mean, excuse me,
Yeah.
Argentina. Yeah.
Right. Of course.
It's just like it was amazing Malbec. And I think that really inspired us to say, you know, Malbec is a noble variety and we need to try to make a Malbec that is going to be unctuous, delicious, and true to its form, as opposed to what 95% of Malbec in California today goes into, which is blends. It just gets disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah. Patty and David were asking how will this wine age? And I guess in general, how does Malbec age? Because it's one of those that like nobody really talks about. You know, you don't even hear the Argentinians talk about sort of aging their Malbecs.
Good question.
That is a really good question. Malbec has, as you can taste through this, it's 100% Malbec, has great acidity. It also has great tannin. And so there's no doubt in my mind that this Malbec is going to age easily 10, 15 years. And all of our Malbecs has done that, except for a couple of vintages, by the way, I have to say. Malbec and Tempranillo have one thing in common. And that is that if you allow them to, they can overproduce fruit, even in the poorest of soils. And whenever you are in a situation with a grower that overproduces the fruit,
Right,
doesn't thin it appropriately, then you get a diminished intensity and it won't age well.
Yeah.
And we've had that experience with a couple of vintages of Malbec that because we buy the Malbec, but we are now like 100% in control of what happens in the vineyard after that experience. So, you know, this Malbec is an example of Malbec at its highest state, but it's one of those grapes that you have to be in the vineyard. You have to.
Yeah, I think if you have
a
production Malbec, it's not gonna age as well as
So-
ultra premium, like a small, you know,
a
thin,
lower yield.
lower
yeah. So
yield. But I
what
really
would you
like
guys
it.
say is the ideal yield for this? Like how many tons per acre is kind of ideal for Malbec?
maybe 4 tons to the acre is ideal. If you go any lower than that, its vigor will then, if you think about any plant, but let's think about vines in particular, there's a certain capacity of growth that it has that's directly related to the soil that it's on, right? So if it's a poor soil, the capacity will be smaller. If it's really healthy soil or good soil, it'll be bigger. Then you have to balance two factors. One is the vegetative
Mhm.
and one is the reproductive. So how do you balance the growth of leaves and canes to fruit load?
Right.
And so on very low yielding vineyards that are on poor soils, that's easier. It's a question of cutting off the fruit so that the vine doesn't overproduce. On heavy vineyards, on vineyards on good soil, the vine will go crazy.
Yeah.
And if you take off too much fruit, then that capacity shifts to the vegetative cycle and it creates an enormous canopy with all these leaves.
Yeah.
So
It's spending way too much energy on the things that aren't maximizing the fruit.
yes, and then you're out of balance because there's a ratio between reproductive and vegetative expression of fruit on any vine.
Yeah.
On any vine. Malbec is a vigorous variety. If you put it on soils that are too vigorous and then undercrop it, you're going to get vegetative fruit that's not interesting.
Yeah.
Like Tempranillo. It's best to put those vineyards, those varieties, on rate limiting soils.
So very
that-
very bad soils limited in nutrients, very rocky, very sandy, like
Yes.
just where they have to the roots have to go as deep as possible to get to the nutrients because they're not available at a very surface
Right.
level.
So your capacity
It can
is this
suffer.
big.
Yeah.
That has to be divided.
Sadism.
You shrink it to this big.
Right.
And then it's easier to control fruit quality. Now with Malbec, what's interesting is the single person or the single winery that gave contracts for Malbec all over California was Gallo.
Mhm.
And they wanted production.
Yeah.
They
They
wanted
want
production.
bulk, basically.
And Malbec gives production. And so fortunately, they use Malbec in blends, so you don't see the name Malbec on the label, because it would destroy any marketing of what Malbec could be on its own when it's on a piece of property on a soil that is rate limiting and keeps the vines in control, right? So, like, let's talk about Albarino, right? Albarino is not a very vigorous variety. And you put it on the best soils, and it's still not very vigorous. Chardonnay, so-so. Malbec and Tempranillo, you put it on a good soil, and boom, it becomes an enormous vine. So then how do you get good quality out of that? You have to balance that capacity of the vine between vegetative and fruit, right? It's much easier if you're on a rate limiting soil. And this Malbec comes from a San Joaquin clay loam, which is a very rate limiting old soil. So, and that's, you just have to know to do that. Otherwise you end up with a kind of an insipid, not interesting wine.
Yeah, it's funny. A vine that we mentioned earlier, the Black Malvoisie or the Black Malvoise, is the same way, where you plant that in, very healthy, fruitful soils, and it is an incredibly vigorous vine that will produce just massive tonnages of grapes, but they'll be kind of insipid and just, very bulk, like thin, lean, bad wines. But you put, a Cinsault vine in a high rocky granite, super loamy clay soil, and you're limiting its vigorousness and getting just maximum attrition out of those grapes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it depends on the grapes because Cabernet don't like that.
Right. No, but that's the point. It's like you have to play the game of, know that a very vigorous vine like Cinsault needs a really rocky soil, where something like Cabernet Franc, which can be a very, lean growing grape, can grow in more vigorous and more nutrient rich soils and thrive.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
So
it's
I have to
funny.
ask, sorry, I didn't mean to transition, but I have to ask, why row 20?
Oh, that's a great question, Chris. That's such a,
Oh,
okay,
get ready.
okay.
Oh, we've got, all
Uh,
right. Is everybody okay to go a little late? Because apparently this
We're
could take a
already
while.
late.
row,
Do you have some
row
popcorn?
20. Are you ready for row 20? Okay.
Oh,
This is purely um me mechanistic work.
It's practical.
It's
It's
practical.
It's
like
like
the
Transformers
like,
more than meets the eye.
So we have this,
it's
we,
about working with farm workers.
yeah, we planted 33 acres of Malbec on this unique, gorgeous soil. And then we thought we want to make Malbec from this because we know it's going to be really good. But we don't need 33 acres of Malbec. That would be close to like, I don't know.
It would ruin your
We just
business.
want to have a little section that is farmed specifically for ultra premium. We want to thin it down. We don't need
Right.
the production. We want
Yeah.
to manicure this to be a really higher quality.
Exactly.
Oh no, sewer style.
And the vineyard actually is extremely uniform in terms of its soil from one end to the other of these 33 acres. So why row 20? Well, row 20 is directly in front of the mailbox of the neighbor on the other side of the street,
Okay.
right? And so it was so easy for me to say, okay,
And in
this
Spanish.
whole vineyard is completely uniform. Go to the mailbox and thin the row in front of the mailbox.
Mm.
And that's the only reason it's row 20. And so then about 2 years
Because
later,
we're working with a lot of illiterate labor that work off of landmarks, okay? And
Yeah.
they need to have a landmark. You can say it's row number 20, but
They're not going to know. They're not going to count to 20. They're going to just know.
yeah,
like-
But
they
here's-
need a landmark.
but here's the
Yeah.
problem. 2 years later, some drunk guy ran over
Oh.
the mailbox.
Oh no.
And we're like, oh,
Which
now
one
the
is row 20?
mailbox is gone. How are we gonna, because we always told to get everyone, go to the mailbox.
Yeah.
And the row in front of the mailbox is the row that we have to treat special, like really cluster per shoot, pull off the leaves, everything. Now the mailbox was gone. And I went to the neighbor and they're like, that's okay. We're not gonna put the mailbox back up because everyone robs our mail anyhow. I'm like, oh my God, how are we gonna?
What sort of a weird cesspool do you live in? Jesus.
It's Lodi, man.
Apparently so. Good Lord. I used to
So
think
we
good things about
pounded
Lodi,
a new
but not
mailbox
anymore.
that
John
nobody gets mail
John
from.
Fogerty was right.
We are stuck in Lodi. It is, yeah.
And so the row 20 has nothing different from row 19 or 21. It's just row 20 because it's in front of the mailbox, but it's always
just a
that row.
cipher. Yeah.
That's it.
I love
That's
it.
Yeah.
I love it.
still
Because you
wanna
look at
find
that,
out
you're
who
like,
knocked out the
oh,
mailbox.
they only source these grapes from row 20. Like, there's something special about they only get this row, like the Bechtold vineyard, where, there's 16 vineyards and they each get one row, and whatever they get out of that one is what they get. Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, well, let me tell you something about the Sanso from the Bechtel vineyard.
Please
Okay?
do.
Okay, so
But only good things, because if it's bad, I may have to hurt you.
Don't pop the bubble.
oh no, I'm not gonna pop the bubble, but I will tell you that there's this thing called the Woodbridge Irrigation District. right?
Okay.
And it's a great thing because it takes water from the McCallamy River and distributes water to all of the growers.
So it's the opposite of the Resnicks in Kern County and San Luis Obispo County.
Yes. Oh, totally opposite. This is like very well controlled. Think
Very
about
socialist.
Lodi.
I love it. Yeah.
Lodi is ultimately very either Italian or German.
Mm.
And the Germans were all Volga Germans. They all came from the Volga region of Russia.
Hmm.
And they were all really into cooperative movement. So they all worked together. And so they created the Woodbridge Irrigation District because everyone could get water from the Mokelumne River and distribute it everywhere. It's very interestingly, very, very interesting what they did. So they did that, and it passes right by the Sanso.
Right.
So the problem is that the ditches aren't lined with cement. So what they do, which I think is fantastic, is they take all of the vines that are close to the ditch and they sell it to people who want to do rosé.
Mm.
And then they take the vines that are further away from the ditch that don't get underwater seepage.
Right.
They sell it to people who do red wines.
Mm.
So if you ever get a rosé
Yeah.
from the Sanso rosé, it comes from closer to the ditch, and they're very particular about how they sell their fruit based on
Yeah.
canals that go through the west side of Lodi. On the east side, we don't have any canals. I wish we
Right.
did. It's really cheap water.
Don't tell us that in Paso. We don't know what cheap water is.
So
That's fascinating stuff. Yeah, I mean, I always knew about the rows. Because when I took my trip to Mecca out there, one of the things that just blew me away was how each row had a like stake and a slate
Yeah.
sign in front of it that had the name of the winery that got that particular row's,
Yeah.
whatever the yield was. It's very Burgundy, very Burgundian in that, like
Yeah.
It
you
is.
get whatever that row is, and McKay gets that one, and Oniata gets that one, and or Onesta gets that one, or whoever it is. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. It's actually, I mean, the way they've done it is fantastic.
Yeah.
The
That's
vineyard's
the way to do
amazing.
old vines, just
Yeah.
like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got to sit down with I can't remember his name, but the gentleman who runs Jesse's Grove, which kind of oversees the property, and then his mother, who was, part of the family that planted the Bechtold vineyard. And the stories we got out of her were just amazing.
She wrote an entire history of San Joaquin
Yes.
County agriculture. Yeah. I met her. She's an amazing person. And then
Yeah.
Greg Burns.
Greg Burns.
Yeah.
And Jesse's Grove and
Jesse's Grove. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
amazing family.
Wanda.
Wanda. Yes, exactly. Yes. And it was made even
Wanda
better in
Bechtold.
that
Wanda.
we had a giant Costco teddy bear named Jojo planted right next to her in the chair because it was a thing at the time that we were doing it. So yes. No, this has been amazing. And yeah, this Malbec, as Stacy pointed out, I mean, the nose on this is just absolutely insane. On this Malbec, it's delicious. So since we are well over time and need to wrap up, but we always enjoy our time with you guys. Thank you so much for being here, spending your time with us. If folks want to get these Tizona wines, you mentioned they're very small batch. You're only doing direct to consumer. So how can folks get their hands on them?
Well, you can get them through the website, basically, or come visit us in Lodi. That's even
Yes.
better.
Yes.
We would love to host you up here anytime. But yeah, the Picpoul Blanc and the Carignan.
The Carignan. Hey, the Carignan. Hey.
They're going to be coming back in a couple weeks because we're just we held this back for you guys. So if you wait a couple weeks, you'll be able to get the next vintage of those. Also, if you like to order online, we have a code. If you use, Rich set this up today. He's like, tell them they use the word forgotten. You get
Which is the best.
10% discount. It's
Okay,
for up to from 1 year from now, you can use
Oh,
the code.
perfect.
So you can not worry about it. If you want to wait till these wines are back up on the website, you can do that, and that'll be good
Nice.
for not only the Tizona, but for the other wines as
Oh,
well.
that's great. Yes,
Yeah.
and we will include that in the email that I send out tomorrow to
Mhm.
everybody who purchased. So even those watching this on replay, you'll be able to get access if you use the code Forgotten on their website up to a year
Come
from
visit
now.
us. I mean, we have the most beautiful views in Lodi.
We really
the most
do.
Beautiful sunsets. We have all kinds of events, and this is our 25th anniversary year.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So we're really, really excited, very proud. We're actually every month featuring a library wine in the tasting room for the whole year to celebrate. And we got some fun events happening. We are releasing our very, very first cava made of
Ooh.
Catalan variety.
Right.
We've been talking about it, right?
Xarel-lo, Macabeo, Periada.
Mariana, yeah, very
Nice.
good.
So that's getting released.
They've
this
been
spring.
teasing it for over a year now.
No,
For
I've
years.
seen the references
So
to the
we're-
Xarel-lo, so yes.
We're not only making the cava, but we're also making Charello and Macabeo still wines.
Really? Oh,
Yes.
AKA
And then next year-
Viura. Yes.
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 Exactly.
But we're calling him Macabeo because he's a Catalan.
I'm
Yeah.
a Catalan, you have to call it
Me
Macabeo.
too. Fuck those Castellanos. Barcelona forever, baby. Fuck Real Madrid.
So, and then next year we'll have the Macabeo, Pareada, and Charello, all three as still wines, and
Oh.
then
Nice.
together as a cava. So
Yeah,
it's gonna be
so-
fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm all in on that. 2026,
Yeah.
I'm all in.
Follow us on social media, get onto our email list, and you'll be up to speed with the latest fun things that are happening at our winery. Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Yeah, we really
Yeah.
appreciate
we
it.
have so much fun telling stories, you can tell.
Oh
Yeah.
no, you guys, yeah. This is the fact that we've gone this long and nobody has dropped off is just a sign of how, interesting and intriguing and what great storytellers you guys are. And we appreciate that. And yeah, it's always great to feature you. I mean, we like I said earlier, we have never ever repeated a winery before. And Allison was a little bit hesitant when we did this, but the fact that we're working with
I was
Bring
not
you under the
hesitant.
bus.
I was disappointed that we were not going to do what we had talked about, where we were going to do comparisons.
but I think
Comparisons.
this I think
That'll
this
be the
works
next
so
time.
much.
We'll be the third repeated
Yeah.
winery. We'll do
There you go.
comparisons.
I still want to know, like, Jody,
Come here, puppy.
what's
yeah.
that bird? I want to know Jody's
Here's our
bird.
little guy.
Jody, you can unmute yourself if you want to talk about what bird is featured there. She may
I'm
not.
just really curious. Yeah, and this
Yeah.
is Nadia. This is our little dog,
Aw,
our little rescue.
cute. Nice.
Hello. That's a Kia from our trip to New Zealand.
That's a
Kia?
Yeah, they were so cute. They were in the parking lot and they're like getting on mirrors and on cars. And so I just thought it was
Your car's to
Thanks.
shred.
too cute.
I'm
It's
more of a
very
Hyundai
cute.
guy than a Kia guy, but that's just me.
No, it's K-E-A.
I know. I'm
Yeah.
I'm messing with you.
It's K-E-A.
The other
Chris.
Kia.
It's K-E-A.
Yeah.
very cute.
Nice.
Thank you.
Great.
All right,
Perfect. Well, if
thank
you
you,
guys don't
guys.
mind sticking around for a couple of minutes, if anybody's got any questions they'd like to ask Liz and Marcus directly, feel free to unmute yourselves and we will do that.
I had a question like, oh, sorry, go ahead. No, Patty, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Stacy.
No, Patty, go ahead.
All right, you're
All
next.
right, Patty first, then Stacy. Go.
I'm just curious about the library wines. So what do you define, how do you choose a wine to go into your library?
Good question.
A very good question. We take every vintage and hold back a minimum of 2 cases or 24
Oh
bottles.
wow, that's minimum.
Because
That's
we
not a
want,
lot.
yeah, it's not a lot. In some vintages where we think it's exceptional, we'll hold it back more. But we want to be able to have a vertical tasting eventually to see how a particular varietal went through every season. And I have to say, at the moment, I think we're the only winery in the United States that has a complete vertical of Tempranillo and Graciano from 2001 to the current vintage.
Wow.
Yeah. And so eventually, not for our own promotion, but I think it'll be really good to be able to show that to wine writers so they can see what these varieties do in the new world.
Yeah.
As a way of defining how important it is not, to understand great wine driven by great varietals, not just Cabernet from France, but other varietals. So
Right. So that's interesting because I mean, obviously, I know you guys were well ahead of the curve in planting Graciano, but it's not a grape that I think of that has age potential because of its higher acidity, and obviously, then everybody got caught in the Monastrell, Morastrell planting issue back in the day. So I'm interested in what you have seen in the ageability of the Graciano.
I can tell you the
Oh my God.
Graciano ages every bit as well as Tempranillo.
Or better. I mean, our
Or better.
Graciano was phenomenal. We just opened we have just a few bottles of 2001, and it's incredible.
It's
Wow.
incredible.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't have the tannic profile of Tempranillo, but the acidity carries it, and it's so fresh. It's really amazing. So we're excited about doing a vertical tasting in the future, and we're so excited about it that we've actually decided to keep more than just 2 cases, but more cases into the future.
Very smart.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not about us. At that point, it's about the industry at large and what California and what the United States can produce in terms of long-lived, beautifully aged wines. So,
Stacy, you're up.
I was gonna say, like, all your wines are delicious, like so balanced and just incredible. I was looking on your website and curious your thoughts or ideas on what your like Petit Verdot, like the Cinsault and the Bordeaux blend. What are your
Yeah, well, the Petit Verdot it's dark and luscious and soft and smooth. I mean, that wine has been, very popular in the tasting room because it's big and bold, but it also isn't, it has like a restrained. I think one of the things about our wines and tasting and talking about them reminds me of how we really exemplify each variety, the character, but they're all balanced and have nice acidity throughout. The Bordeaux blend changes each year. We just tried the 2021 the other day, and it's a blend of Cabernet because we have a little bit of Cabernet from our neighbor. We've got our own Merlot. In fact, we're just releasing a Merlot that is, I never ever thought we would make Merlot. Our
I will
Merlot
not make rookie
is so good.
Merlot.
It is so good. It is amazing. The Merlot actually, but it has Merlot, it has Cab, it has Malbec, and what's the other thing? Petit Verdot. And so it's our Bordeaux blend. Did you guys know the story behind Tizona? Why it's named Tizona? And
We didn't
talk
get into
about
that,
it.
which I
We
apologize.
didn't
I
even
know,
talk about that. Okay.
I know it involves a sword.
So Tizona is the name of a sword of El Cid Seed. Anybody see that Charlton Heston?
But
Yeah.
the actual name of the sword is Tizona?
Yes, the actual name of the sword is called Tizona. It was Seed's battle sword. It is a real sword. It is in a museum in Burgos, Spain.
Wow.
Marcus and I went on a pilgrimage route, brought a bottle of Tizona wine to give to the museum director.
Nice.
And it is a battle sword. It is scarred. It is rough. It has a bloodline where you could pull it out, you know, because it would of the suction, you know. It's a sword. It has engraved on it. And then we put that on the back of the bottle. It says, I am Tizona, made in the year 1040.
I saw that. Yes, I meant
That's
to
how
ask
old
you
this
about
sword is.
that, but you
In the
guys are
year-
two good
we're-
storytellers.
We're going to have a huge party at the winery in
2040,
2040, just
a
a few
1,000-year
years.
anniversary.
1,000-year anniversary. But in La Colada is the name of the ceremonial beautiful sword he would use for ceremonies. So we dubbed La Colada as our name of our Bordeaux blend. Yeah, the
That would be my
San-
next question of, where that name
Yeah.
came from on the blend of.
Yes, exactly. So that's the reasoning behind that. And you guys got to try our Merlot. I tell you, it's turned my world around.
When is that coming? Is that
That will be on the website, and we're just releasing it for our wine club actually this weekend. And it'll be out on the website in a couple of weeks.
And you'll get a 10% discount if you use the code
So
Forgotten.
wait until those wines show
pre-order?
up.
Yeah, pre-order.
Oh, we have a good amount of we have like 168 cases, but it's not going to go right away. So you'll have time.
How's your the Sisu? Is that like with the
Very
flavors
beautiful.
with that?
It's a very light, delicate, very low alcohol wine. We only made it for one vintage when Marcus was able to get his hands onto that Bechtold Sanso, which is so coveted.
Yes.
There was somebody who dropped out, we took their place. And so we grabbed it. But we're basically sold out. I don't know if we have maybe a tiny bit, maybe a case or something left at the winery. We're gonna see if we can get our hands on it again because it was really fresh and delicious. And an honor really to work with that vineyard, you know.
Yeah, that vineyard is honestly like it was a religious experience going out to it and walking around those just like so low head trained vines, and it's just all gravel everywhere you look. It was like being on a moonscape. It was kind of just an amazing experience.
But it's definitely lighter and fresher than the Carignan, just a little bit from there. So if you liked the Carignan, I think you would like the Sanso.
So
all your wines were fantastic, and like there was no like high alcohol level. A lot of it you can kind of taste like, ooh, this is tasting hot, or this drink's warm, or it's like it was very balanced, like certain like soft mouthfeel on some of the things, like just like you said, like that leanness. It was, I mean, very amazing. Thank you for creating beautiful wines to share with us. Really appreciate it. They're
particularly
delicious.
with Lodi fruit, because you guys fall into the same trap other Lodi wineries, not you guys, other Lodi wineries fall into the same trap we fall into here in Paso, which is because of the high heat. You think, oh, we have to produce 15-16% red wines and whatnot. But clearly these are not.
Yeah.
Oh, they're delicious. Thank you so much.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank
They
you,
are delicious,
Stacey.
every single one.
Patty, thank you. One of the things that we did when we came to Lodi, let's see, we planted our first vineyard in 1995. And at the time,
30 years ago.
yeah, at the time, Lodi produced just high alcohol, high extraction.
Right.
And we just thought, we just came back from Europe in our VW bus, and we're like, we want to create wines that are nuanced, delicious, and terroir driven. And we have not at all moved away from our passion for making those kinds of wines.
Mm.
And I think we have been vindicated in the sense that I'm not going to say that we,
Vindicated.
vindicated. But I'm not going to say, I don't want to give too much
Vindicated.
credit to us, but I think that there's a movement in Lodi that has gone away from these alcoholic, sweet, huge wines to more nuanced, delicious wines. Because I mean, you can do that anywhere. You can make huge wines in Alexander Valley, Napa Valley, Lodi, you know that. But
Yeah.
but
We've got somebody like Sue Tipton who's doing, Acquiesce wines,
yeah.
all white Rhone varietals, which like
I know.
nobody thinks of that in Lodi, but
I know.
she's killing it with that, which is amazing.
It's amazing. It's such a testimony to see what you can
She-
do with
yeah.
creative and innovative winemaking and farming to hand. They go together in our region, and we love breaking the mold,
And honestly, the Sansos that even Michael David creates now
Yeah.
is a change from
Yeah.
their original, style that was driven by market demand, but that
Right.
also, I think, diminished Lodi. And now they are going towards more refined wines and interesting wines.
Clinker